Hey everybody, Doug here with 2 Plus Stuff, and Warcry has been out for a little while now, and I am loving it. I'm always trying to get new folks involved. We're actually doing a local set of campaigns at the store down the road from me, and having a great time doing that. And in addition to that, once I get a few last little bits of things painted, I'm going to be doing a full campaign here on the channel. It's been apparently very highly anticipated. People blow up the comments asking about it, so I didn't realize there was that big of anticipation. But that's the thing, is like the game is incredibly simple to learn, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of memorable moments. But when you try to get new folks into it, they can look at the current roster of books available and get a little bit intimidated, for the same reason that people can be intimidated by D&D when you walk into the game store and you see the huge lexiconum of different expansions and opportunities. It's a lot to take in, and for its relative age of only being out a couple months, not even a full year yet, you have 3 books that are really game defining. And so I wanted to talk about those today, because as much as I love this game and I've been playing quite a bit of it, I haven't actually done a formal review of any one of these books. But what I wanted to talk about today was 2 things really, is the value of them, right? What they bring to your hobby experience, and kind of assess what books do you actually want, what books do you need, based on the idea that each of these allows you to really custom craft the kind of game experience you want to a T. And that's actually what I really think the beauty of Warcry is that you can put yourself in the hardest of hard modes if you go out of your way to make that kind of game setting, or you can have it be very simple and very light. It all depends on what you want to do, and we're going to talk about how to achieve all of those today. When it comes to understanding the value of these books, really you have to talk about how Warcry plays, and really fundamentally there's 2 main ways to play the game: matched play and campaign play, or narrative play. There is an open play, but that really is more reserved for having multiplayer games where the rules are kind of very asymmetrical, and it kind of helps prevent one gang from being ganged up on, so to speak. But really the 2 main ways are matched play, which is just you and your opponent have symmetrical goals and stuff like that. It's like you're trying to achieve the same things, you have the same deployment zones, that kind of stuff. It's very matched, as much as you can be very even keeled. And then you have campaign or narrative play, which is taking your warband on a story, and we'll talk about how that is supported across the multiple books. For example, my warband right now that I'm using, the Untamed Beasts, they have a campaign called The Hunt for the Fire Scar, which pits my warband on a 12-game long series of events to hunt down and kill a giant flame dragon to impress Archaeans. All of them are very narrative based. They're all very congruous with the story of the warband, and kind of adds a lot of flavor to it. There's actually a sheet in the back of the book, and I'll leave it in the link down below, and I'll put it up on the screen here, where basically it's a campaign progress tracker, so you can keep up to date with everything that your warband is doing, including who's in it and how far you've progressed along that story arc. Every 3rd mission in this is called a convergence. Now, what a convergence really is just, hey, instead of generating your games any other way, which there are many, and we'll talk about that, you have to play this specific game. It tells you how to put the terrain out, and also the mission objectives and that kind of stuff. Really what it is that every 3rd game kind of reinforces the narrative of, for me, for example, like I just mentioned, trying to hunt and kill the fire dragon. So it's missions and twists that are really geared towards giving you that specific flavor. That's all it is. While you can progress in your story, even in losing other games, you have to beat a convergence to keep going. But here's the thing. Outside of those 3 convergences, right, those 3 very specific things that are trying to tell a very keen story, you have 9 games of your campaign that you can do a lot with, and you can create some really epic moments and change the complexity and difficulty level to suit whatever you want. And that's the real power of these supplements that we're about to chat about. That is that they can give you the tools that you need to tell some really, really cool stories. As always, you can play a game that is the standard format from the core book, which is to just draw randomly a deployment, a mission, and a twist card, and kind of play a very randomized game there. You could play a matched play game, and your friend doesn't have to be doing a campaign, but you can still keep track of who died and that kind of stuff on your own. Your warband can fight massive monsters and then recruit them as part of their army. And these are called challenge battles. And basically what that means, and challenge battles are a thing that was introduced by the Monsters and Mercenaries book, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But basically it's the idea that this is a unique set of combatants that are going to be fighting, and there's like very special rewards for taking on a challenge battle. You can again gain access to a giant monster, maybe it's like a cool artifact or something like that, and that I think is really the way that they're going to start supplementing these games in quite a bit. They certainly did one in White Dwarf recently with Gotrek Gunnarsson, where you just all you have to do is slip in a single challenge battle and it opens up an opportunity for you to play a very unique mission with your warband. And so when you put these tools together, you have the opportunity to create a very customized story, both in terms of the events that happen in it, the difficulty of it, but it's not dependent on other people because they can be playing largely match play games or really just anything they want to play, and you can keep track of your story on your own. And so now we're going to jump into the specific books and talk about what they offer. Now, this book's been out for a while. I don't need to do a deep, super review. The real value of it, one, is that you get the core rules for the game, you get some inspiring artwork, and you get the rules for how to progress through a campaign. Those are the things that are really, really simple. Now, when the game first launched, people complained that it was too simple, it was too broad. But my retort to that, if you will, was that what it was is this is a base, and everything else that they come out with is built upon this base and adding more complexity. So when we talk about creating a custom game experience, right, of having the exact kind of experience with your hobby that you want, this is how you do it. You make something that's base simple, and then expansions allow you to custom craft all the cool things that you can do. So is it a little bit vanilla? Kind of. I mean, in the sense that, you know, you're always rolling for terrain, randomly drawing, I should say, not rolling. And all the cards are in the back, so you don't have to buy the deck if you don't want to. And of course, you have the rosters and that kind of thing in the back as well. So, you know, you can do whatever you like. The truth of the matter is, this is a fantastic first book to buy to actually learn the game, because things only get cooler from here, and now we're going to talk about them. The next book to be released immediately afterwards, and I'm sorry for the glare of my lights, a little intense there, but is Monsters and Mercenaries. This was an interesting one because, for one, it's very, very small. It's not terribly thick at all, and people weren't really expecting it. We thought we were going to get either the two Chaos factions that hadn't been released yet, but instead we got this. So we'll take a look at what this book has to offer here, and I'll just flip through while I read off a few things. First off was the idea of mercenaries, and these really are just leaders and heroes that exist in the full game of Age of Sigmar that they give you a chance to port over. So let me give you an example here. And basically nearly every single faction in Age of Sigmar has access to, or that's playable here, has access to some kind of mercenary who can help them. Each one of these can make up some of the deficiencies for some of the faction in really cool ways, and they all have their own like stat lines and personal abilities that correspond to them. So like your Aspiring Deathbringer can do things that, say, your Slaughter Priest can't, that kind of thing. And so they really are a self-contained like brick that you bolt onto your existing warband. A good example for me is when I do play my Corvus Cabal. Those are the very light assassin types. I like to bring a Maggotkin of Nurgle unit because what that army, that warband lacks is toughness, and so having a fat, heavy guy to sit on your objective or something like that is really useful. It kind of makes up, again, some of the deficiencies. And they work just like any other unit. You can see there's a price tag in the top right. That's exactly how it functions. You could buy them just like you would buy any other unit. There are a few rules for how, you know, they level up and how that all works and how they work into the warband, that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's very straightforward. Just take a model that you think is cool and throw them in your warband. Now, next up, it introduced an idea called Fated Quests. Fated Quests, to put it very simple, are campaigns that anyone can go on. Okay, that is the absolute simplest way of saying it. And really what it is, you see the exact same thing you saw before, where it has, you know, your campaign, your narrative that you're trying to achieve, your artifacts, command traits that you gain on this journey, and then your three convergences that like kind of bring out the core flavor of the story here. Again, outside of those three games, you can do whatever you want. And of course, you can bring your allies into these games. One thing that is really cool that they added at this point and have basically been doing going forward is when a campaign has an outcome, right? When you achieve your final convergence and you finish the story of your game, you get a choice, and your choices are based on doing an honorable thing or doing the glorious thing. And the glorious thing is typically pretty evil because a lot of these are chaos factions, but you can choose honor or glory, and you get a different reward. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure thing. And there's a page where you flip and you can go see the different rewards that you've gotten based on your choice. I recommend not flipping ahead and reading because I want you to just think about it. But I think it's a really cool idea because now, not only are you creating stories like you were before, but now you have consequences if you take your warband from one story to the next, right? There's a story behind the time he was hunting the Doomblade, apparently, and now all of a sudden the consequences of that choice will carry with him, and I like that kind of stuff. I love when there's consequences in a reoccurring story. Like I said, there are 4 of these campaigns that anyone can play, which means if you were playing one of the Chaos factions, where you got 2 in the first book, and now you have 4, that means you now have 6 stories that you can take your one warband on. Now, of course, you might feel the pressure to go buy a different warband, that kind of thing, but you don't have to. And that really does matter if you want to have an incredibly concise narrative of this one warband's exploits, this epic champion on his rise to glory. You can do all of them, and I think that's really stinking cool. However, the biggest thing that this book added was challenge battles, and this is again, like I said before, a one-off game that has a specific narrative feel. Now, in Monsters and Mercenaries, the challenge battles are limited to only fighting against epic-sized beasts, and so you'll have one where this mission's called Colossal Carnage. It tells you how to set up the game, who the challenger is, meaning who's running the monster, what they can take, what your warband can take. It tells you, if there's specific, rules around how the board is set up and the mission type and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you get a huge reward after you do it because you're choosing to do something that is, in theory, quite hard for your warband to accomplish. And it's actually super cool. So these are ones where, again, it's a one-off mission. It's intended to be somewhat harder and more challenging, at least different than your standard game, where you're like flipping cards to make sure like you have a different deployment and that kind of stuff. But the rewards, for example, this one allows you to search more for treasure and that kind of stuff. That's awesome. And it says the adversary can be added to the challenger's warband or roster. So if you defeat, say, a Gorgon, a huge monster, you can add it to your army, assuming you meet the qualifications for that. So that's a really cool thing. Now, I'll be honest with you, if you didn't already own these monsters, right, if you didn't own, and there's quite a few, I mean, honestly, there's quite a few monsters here. If you didn't already own them, I'm going to be honest and say there's not a ton of incentive to go out and buy them, but the idea of this kind of mission is going to be really important when we talk about our next book. So kind of put a pin in that, and we'll move into the 2019 Tomah Champions. And here it is, actually my favorite book that came out from GW this year. I wish they had kind of made it a hardcover, like something a little more durable, but that is all right. Now this book added a little bit of everything. And we're going to go through it a little bit. Some of it, honestly, is more relevant than others. And this is a big thing that GW is moving towards, where it's annual supplements. And I really like the idea of annual supplements because it combines all the rules that have come out in the previous year, makes them really, really easy to get. Now, one of the things here is if you played an existing Age of Sigmar army, when Warcry dropped, there was huge decks of cards that you could buy that gave you all the rules for your faction. The thing is that we didn't know that those were limited release, and so now they're pretty much hard to get. However, in the back of the Tomah Champions, you have whatever the previous year, I'm assuming, release for Age of Sigmar armies is. So, for example, here's your Stormcast, your Deepkin, all the factions that I mentioned before that were supported in the core book with their campaigns and that kind of stuff. All the rules exist here. So if you do have an existing Age of Sigmar army and you want to dip into Warcry, absolutely check this book out. Now, in addition to that, somewhat oddly, in the very beginning of this book, hold on, there's a bunch of campaigns for armies that don't have rules yet. And this is because I'm sure it's just like a release cycle hiccup or something like that. But all the factions that are listed here are coming to Warcry. We're just waiting on the cards. Once we have those and we know what the rules are for them, you can begin playing their personal campaigns. And to make it really simple, I listed them off here. It is Slaves to Darkness, Ossiarch Bone Reapers, Ogre Maw Tribes, Carriage and Overlords, Disciples of Tzeentch, Skaven, more Stormcast Eternals, Beasts of Chaos, Sylvaneth, Fire Slayers, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Seraphon. So there's a lot coming, and it makes up a good portion of this book. So if you have any of those factions I just listed, hold on tight. You're going to get some rules here pretty soon, and you can start playing games with us. So in addition to that, it does have 7 more campaigns that anyone can walk through. Again, I think that's very important for replayability and continuing to get invested in your warband. And they work like Monsters and Mercenaries, where they have those narrative choices at the end, the honor and glory, choose your own adventure type thing here at the bottom. I think all of that is really important for adding a lot of distinction to your warband when you make choices that affect their rewards. And in addition to that, there is 7 more challenge battles. Now I want to talk about these because these are a little bit different. My main complaint with the Monsters and Mercenaries one was that it just required these frankly somewhat expensive but really big centerpiece models to be able to play, right? Whereas the ones that came out in the Tomah Champions use existing models or different units. My favorite one here is an ill-advised expedition where you're trying to escort a wizard, here's your traveling wizard rules down at the bottom, across the table board and help him survive. All right, it doesn't matter if you're good or bad, he hired you for a job, you got to get the job done. And I love that specifically because, you know, you don't have to use this model, but you can just have any model represent your wizard that you're trying to escort. And, you know, there's rules, again, for your opponent doing their own warband, but it's not that same, like, all-encompassing, you know, you have to play this specific monster and then get him in your warband, that kind of stuff. All of these are much more, I think, reasonable when it comes to like what a cool challenge battle would be, where they took more time to invest in cool scenarios like an escort mission. This one you're fighting looks like trogs and maybe some, I think that you can also have access to what are they called, squigs, that kind of stuff. Here's one where you're fighting undead. There's a lot of cool stuff here. Here's one where you're trying to fend off from a flesh eater court guy. Again, you know, do you have to have the specific models you're talking about? Absolutely not, but they are much more reasonable to try out than getting like a $50 monster kit to do that. Now, one other thing to mention here is the idea of roaming beasts. So, in the base Warcry set, if you got the 2-player box, there was like these little, I call them corn turkeys, but the Raptorics and the Furies, and there are some twist cards that add these monsters to the game. However, with the Tomah Champions 2019, they've introduced a whole bunch more, whether they're undead who are being awoken by this disturbance of 2 warbands fighting, or just random monsters roaming around like squigs and trogs and that kind of stuff. All of these monsters can wake up and get really, really mad and be a part of your game. It's not a huge deal. Like, you know, they're not game breaker like that, and there's only a portion of the twist cards that really use them. But I do think it is very, very fun. And some of these really do play a prominent role in the challenge battles earlier, so you already have all the rules here printed for them. Makes it really simple. This is a great way to introduce new models to the game that, frankly, people probably have more of than Furies and Raptorixes, but I think it's a really nice touch. However, the crown jewel of this entire book, I would say from my opinion, is going to be the Trial of Champions. It's described as Warcry on hard mode, and this is kind of a set of bolt-on rules that go right over the first campaign set that we saw in the core book, right? How campaigns are run, that kind of thing. It overlays perfectly and seamlessly on top of that. And what it does is it tweaks a few things to up the challenge level. For example, warriors can get injured, and that can carry on permanently, or they can heal between games. There are different tables to earn rewards on, so some of them are nothing, some of them are just different based on the way the mechanics in Trial of the Champions work. When you dominate a territory, which is a rule thing I never mentioned, because I don't really need to go into it right now, but basically you can search for treasure in old ruins and things like that of places you've conquered, and it's harder to replace and add warriors. And so that's a huge deal when people start getting injured and you have to split your resources of glory to attain new warriors to replace injured or dead ones. And so I love this edition. It's a ton of fun. I've been playing it personally with my Warcry games lately because I think the challenge and the idea of injured models really ups the fun factor for me. And I wish it was part of the base game. I think it should have been, but this is a great addition, and it's a great reason to get the Tomah Champions. It does add a little bit more to keep track of, but honestly, on the grand scale, everything fits on that one page. What is on the back here? Yeah, everything fits here, and you're just fine. So I mean, it's not a big deal. Well, so with all of that out of the way, what do these books really offer the game as a whole? I think for sure the core book is a great place to start just to see if you like Warcry in general. You have to get your core rules anyway, and it has such a wide swath of support for the new Chaos factions as well as some of the existing Age of Sigmar armies, what we'll call Wave 1, I suppose you could say, for Warcry. Everything is there that you need to get started. Now, next up behind that, I would say grab the Tomah Champions. Honestly, you can probably skip the Monsters and Mercenaries supplement if that's what you want, if it doesn't offer anything specifically for you, because the Tomah Champions has a bunch of campaigns. It stacks on stuff that you already own, meaning the core book. You get more value out of that if you do the Trial of Champions. It has, like I said, total campaigns, has the rules for challenge battles reprinted, so you're not missing anything by skipping Monsters and Mercenaries, and I think those challenge battles are a lot more fun and accessible for newer players. The book that I struggle to recommend for most folks is Monsters and Mercenaries. The real thing it does add is the allies, like the actual mercenaries part of Monsters and Mercenaries, where you can take heroes that you may already own and you just love, maybe conversions or stuff you've done for them and add them to your warband. I think that's a really cool thing. The fact that they just slot into your faction seamlessly is really nice and well done. The problem I have with it, though, is that the 4 campaigns you get are great, but you get 7 in Tomah Champions, and the challenge battles, while a neat idea, and certainly the first time that we've seen those when this game was launched, having to play a game where you're shoehorned into playing a monster that you may not be able to put in your war party, depending on how the rune marks and that kind of stuff work out. This is all rule stuff, you don't have to worry about it, but I just think it doesn't have a whole lot of legs. A lot of people were disappointed when they got this. They're like, okay, but I'm never going to play that. And that's true. You can always do the allies thing, the mercenary part, I guess, but you can't always do the beasts. And so that's kind of a bummer when it's literally most of the book is just like, when am I going to do that? Whereas in Tomah Champions, the challenge battles have extreme flavor, like the, defending the wizard kind of mission, where they add new and unique challenges and stuff outside of just kill the big guy. So if you're new, go for the core book, and if you can still get it, the 2-player starter box is a fantastic place to start. I really cannot recommend it enough if you can still find it. Outside of that, the core book is fantastic because it has all the cards in the back, like printed off, so you don't have to buy the deck even. That's more of a convenience thing. And then the Tomah Champions really emphasizes all the cool stuff in there and builds on top of it. So I would say grab those 2, skip Monsters and Mercenaries for later on down the road if you know there's a specific ally or monster that you want to play. I hope you enjoyed this video. I basically wanted to do it so that people, as I'm doing the Warcry campaign, I know these questions are going to come up, and so I wanted to create this video to point people towards that before I even started, so I had a link ready to send them that way. If you have thoughts about each of these supplements, go ahead and leave the comments down below. We'll continue the conversation there, and tell me, what is your favorite warband? For me personally, I am very excited about the Maggotkin coming to Warcry. As you can see behind me, I'm painting all mine up, and I'm very excited to bring them to the 8 points. And I will catch you guys later. Happy wargaming.